Welcome, Sara. Wow, it's so wonderful to have you here. And we just had a very little conversation before we started, but I think I said it in the in a post earlier on that this is my number 14. So it's the 14th, which is a real significant number for me. So that makes it even more exciting to celebrate that with you today. So,
well, it's an absolute pleasure, Alina, and particularly to be number 14, which I understand is your lucky number.
It is. So that's fabulous. And it is before the end of, I think for me, I'll have a break for the end of, or definitely for the rest of July. So it's nice to celebrate that. It just happened in a way that wasn't planned. But I always say there is never a coincidence. So we're finishing with 14 and then we're starting back again in August. But I'd love to, well, why don't we start with what's something audacious about you?
Oh, well, I think the most audacious thing I have ever done in hindsight was choosing to leave teaching, which was a regular paid professional job, which both my parents were involved in. So it was very much part of sort of the history of the family, and to decide to set up my own company. I mean, that for me was a very, I suppose at the time I thought it was a bold, courageous move, particularly as I had no role models, Alina, in my family of anyone founding or running their own business. None. We were either teachers, nurses. That was basically it in our family. So it was that feels, even now actually, even though my coaching impact has run longer than the time I was then teaching, it still feels like that was a pretty audacious move to do. And I had 2 young children at the time, like really tiny. So on paper, it looked like a mad thing to do.
And it was totally audacious. I mean, how long ago was that? Actually, remind me. I totally could
over 18 years ago.
Wow. 18 years. And what I know of you is that you already, I mean, you've made such a huge impact in the world in those 18 years, which is incredible. And, your work with teams and the performance and the legacy, that's fabulous. So, and I mean, and then we know in number sort of 14, this started with a dare, the whole audacious conversation with James and Mandy, which we both know.
Yeah.
But it was all about redefining Audacity under these sort of 3 pillars of courage, care, and non-conformity. So I would love to explore whichever one, wherever your energy goes to first, and then we'll go from there.
I think my energy always goes to courage, actually. I think that's sort of been the milestones that have happened in my life have required courage. But equally, I think they're really difficult to untangle, because courage, I know for me, really, really requires care of me, so that I can then take care of the choices that I've made or that other people are involved in making. And that, I think when you're courageous, it sort of inevitably involves some sense of non-conformity. But I'm drawn to courage, because I think that's what I'm most of the time when I'm working with clients or working with teams. It's about the courage to make the choices that are going to make the biggest difference to them or their team or their families or the way they want to live their life, so that they can achieve what they want, whatever achieve means to them, and live well. And therefore, they need to learn faster. And to learn faster, they need to, in a way, grow stronger with the choices that they make. So that requires, we're back to courage again. So I think it's courage that I'm drawn to, actually.
And so I'd love to just explore that with you. If we go back to your career as a teacher, and we can then come back to,
yes.
I'd love to, is there anything that really stands out as, somewhere where it required courage from your side, and then it had a significant impact from there on?
Well, there are 2 really pivotal moments in my teaching career for me. And one was a very personal experience where I was a young teacher, fresh out of doing my PGCE, and I had a beautifully planned lesson. And I was teaching Elizabethan drama to a year 9 class who, on the whole, had already made their decision as to whether they were going to do drama or not. So, year 9 is always a difficult time because they've sort of decided. But there was a particular student in that class who was very, very difficult. I mean, they were, on the whole, it was a very challenging comprehensive. And I had started this lesson and I felt like I was following my plan and doing what I was meant to be doing and everything that I'd been taught to do. And he interrupted the lesson and he said, "Miss, this lesson is effing boring."
Wow.
And that was like, I mean, I can even remember it as I'm saying it to you now. It was a very physical response that happened to me in that moment, because I had 29 other people watching, young people watching what was going to happen in this moment. And I could feel the surge of energy. I could feel myself going very red. I could feel myself like not knowing what to do. But in that moment, what was incredible for me is that the breathing techniques that I had learnt to play my violin in high difficult exam situations, my violin teacher had been drilling me from a very young age in managing my breath. Because if you mess up with your breath playing the violin, it really does impact your ability to play very well, because you're shaking or your whole body is responding to the instrument. But what was fantastic in that moment was that it automatically kicked in that I needed to breathe. So I just took time to breathe, to get myself back into a moment of choice. And that allowed me to say, in fact, I certainly couldn't say what I said at the time now, because I probably, but I did say, listen, I didn't get up this morning to come to this lesson to be effing boring. Please tell me how I can make this lesson more interesting to you. And that took an enormous amount of courage for me to say that. But it also was a pivotal moment with that class, Alina. It shifted the relationship entirely, because we then spent the rest of the lesson discussing relevance of education, relevance of the content in the lesson to everybody, to different people's lives. And actually for him, he was so used to being kicked out of a lesson from saying something. Like, he was ready for that. He was not ready for me to lean in and with curiosity ask him how I could make it more interesting to him. So that stuck with me forever. I mean, I was like 26, I think, when that happened to me. So that, when I think about the dots, even saying that out loud, I think that the courage that took, though, depended on something that I had been drilling as a pressure practice, actually, all the way through my life up to that point, and made me think, actually, the power of having something like that you can automatically call on without much cognitive capability because you've drilled it. That's what interests me now, right? That's what I'm really doing most of the time with leaders under pressure, is helping them build in the habits and the rituals to enable them to make those choices, to give themselves that moment to make a choice around what they are going to do, as opposed to jumping into an impulse, which would have been, get out of my classroom, I'm going to send you to the head, and all of that. I just managed that moment to interrupt that because of something I'd done or been practicing way for a long, long time. That was one pivotal moment. But the other really pivotal moment was as a teacher, and anyone listening to this who's ever been a teacher, your difficult children are often put on report because they get kicked out of lessons or their behavior's been not unacceptable. And so at the end of every day, I had to look at these reports of probably about 4 or 5 people in my class and see how their day had been. And what's so fascinating is that this child in front of me, young person in front of me, out of 5 lessons, sometimes would have absolutely brilliant, fantastic contribution, couldn't have asked for better. And then the very next lesson had been outrageous, rude, and been sent out. And I got more and more intrigued as to what those classroom leaders had been doing to enable that same child in the space of 2 hours to want to learn versus being switched off from learning. So I had to run detentions. And so I made a decision to do like a year's exploration with these young people who I was doing the detention with, to say, what is it that, why do you want to go to a particular lesson? And why do you not want to go to a particular lesson? What is it about that teacher, that classroom teacher, that's bringing out the best of you? And through those discussions, it was a piece of research that I did over a year, basically oral history, really, oral data. It came down to 3 key things, which have sat at the heart of everything that we do really in a business now, but also when you're working with a team, they told me 3 things. They told me they loved working and learning with teachers who were clearly passionate about their subject. And they described that, Alina, in very different ways. You know, it wasn't necessarily all singing or dancing, but there was something about what that teacher felt about their subject that they wanted. And you know, we've all had, haven't we, examples of people in our lives who've done that for us. That was number 1, being passionate about their content. Secondly, they told me that these classroom teachers were doing something really interesting with the content. It wasn't just, you know, the same old turn to page X. They had thought about how this content was going to land on their, we're talking 30 individuals of very different, like these were kids from a variety of different backgrounds. We had about 93 different languages spoken in the school at that time. So they thought about that, and they had applied the module of learning to the people that were in front of them. And then the third thing was that they felt seen by those teachers. They felt, amongst 30 individuals, they felt relevant, they felt seen, and they felt that the teacher on some level cared about how to deliver or teach them. And those 3 ingredients felt like that's just far too useful to stay with just leaders in classrooms, although I do think some of the best leaders are the ones I met in teaching. The level of what they were having to deal with hour by hour every day is pretty phenomenal. But those 2 things, you asked me the question about what, you know, 2 moments, those were basically the moments that inspired me to step out of teaching and also remember the power of practice.
I love it. I love it, Sara, because they're such powerful 2 examples that you use with so many. I mean, you've got courage in there, of course. You've had the care, which is what the kids or young adults really care about in the teacher. And of course, making it interesting, as you said, making it relevant to the other person. And it's so powerful how you change someone's life.
That's so true. And actually, now, as you've been talking, I'm thinking the non-conformity, I think what I also got from there is those classroom teachers were not being held ransom by the content in the curriculum. They were adapting the curriculum content to the audience so that it could land on them in a way that it felt like they could become hungry about wanting more of it. And I think there's that's a different thought that's just come in actually with your 3 headings. I think I think it's much harder now to be non-conformist when you're teaching. But I think in the time that I was teaching, it was more possible. You had more freedom with the content than I think potentially you've got now.
Potentially. I don't know. I would sort of love to challenge that a little bit. Well, I don't know. And you've obviously haven't been there for a while. But I think we have, at every stage, you will have, you know, role models who will be willing. And, you know, you acted in a non-conforming way, in the way you sort of challenged your young adult, and then he or she engaged, and then from there you went on this wonderful journey together. And I think it's the same, is at every level we have this moment, this sort of sliding door moments where we choose which way we want to go. And if you need to be creative with your content to engage them, I think it's taking the risk. I mean, actually, that's the other part of the Audacity, is taking that risk in order to, you know, just get a beautiful, positive outcome. You don't know what's going to be on the other side, but at least you can take that risk and try. So I love that story. And I'm curious, as I know you're working with, you know, your big passion, and actually you mentioned the passion for a teacher, that it's helping people to perform under pressure. So how is that showing in your practice today versus those 20 years ago with those difficult kids?
Well, I think it's, I think actually the 3 ingredients still apply hugely in terms of how do you remain as a leader so connected to where it is that you're wanting to take your business or taking your team. There's a level of belief in who you are and what you're on, the journey you're taking people on, that I think is still very much required. And I think, but I do think that the level of competing distractions and priorities and uncertainty that exists for many leaders and teams that we work with is immense right now. So it requires even more deliberate choice, I think, where you're going to spend your energy. And I'm really interested, as you know, around energy and how leaders look after themselves so they have enough in the tank to be able to deliver on the many responsibilities that they have, as well as having some left for their families and the people that they love and the things they want to do in their life. That requires even more attention now, I think, to be able to maximize your energy so that you can give it, multiply it through other people, but also recover your own energy. And that's where, for me, the SHED method is vital to eat. It was called the SHED method as a book because sleep, hydration, exercise, diet are the basics. It's very, very difficult to perform if you don't have enough fuel in your tank. You can for a small amount of time, but ultimately you need it. So this idea of how it plays out with the teams and the leaders we work with now, it's helping them to stay true to being what we call properly selfish, so that they can then give energy, multiply energy with the people that they work with. So that's how I think it plays out now.
Totally. But actually, you mentioned SHED. I think for some, maybe some people in the audience, they will not, might not have made the connection that you are the author of the book, which is called the SHED method. And that's a lot of those practices are in there. And it's interesting because you mentioned, that those many years ago was the practice of breathing from your violin practice, which just came intuitively to you in that moment. So just maybe give a little bit more context about the SHED method as such, and how does in today's world, which is so full of distractions.
Yeah, well, I think the SHED method was written as a sort of human manual to contain sort of practices and routines to enable people that, with the practices that have evolved for us over thousands of hours of coaching leaders and teams. What do people do actually to enable them to stay in the moment of choice so they can make the choices that serve them best? And these tools and techniques and practices have been derived and echoed through high performance across all sorts of walks of life. So we learn with and from high performers from, sport, from the arts, from the military, people who've basically done their hard yards of practice that enable them to have these tools and practices available to them when their bandwidth is when they haven't got the bandwidth to think, because you can't have a practice that serves you in that pressure moment, Alina, if you haven't practiced it outside of that pressure moment. I mean, it's wonderful watching the sport that's going on right now because you can see it happening, in our own England's football team at the moments of, and so many of them are saying, well, they've managed, they've drilled self-regulation in moments of pressure. And I think our leaders and our teams are having to do that more and more because of all of the reasons. And the SHED method laid that out in a sort of way of 3 brains. We have 3 brains, we have 5 energies, simple way of thinking about the way we operate. But ultimately, if we're not careful, we are held captive by our instincts and urges under pressure. And what we want to try and do is to give us, by that moment of choice, seconds where we actually pause for a moment before deciding what we want to do and how we want to go forward. And that has to be drilled. And a lot of the time what we're doing as performance coaches in our team is helping people hold themselves to that, be it self-care, be it, a lot of the people we're working with now are depleted in their energy, particularly for the things that they really want to do, or the people that they really love in their life. How do you do that? How do you make sure that you've got 2 bars in your battery left at the end of the day to be able to give it to the people that really matter to you? Sometimes it sounds simple, but it's not, because it takes effort and it takes deliberate effort and attention to want to do that. So yeah, that's what the SHED method is there for. It's a human performance manual when you need it the most.
I love that. And yes, there is, as you said, is a deliberate practice, as you said. And I always say to my own clients, families, that sort of 2% extra, you know, to your point of having those sort of 2 bars left, you really need to consciously and deliberately watch that energy and not disperse it, as we know. But I wanted to ask sort of almost like well, not a cheeky question, but because you brought this, and I was curious about what was audacious, you know, in that sort of, as a new author with my book coming out in August, because I'm curious, you wrote the book a while back, but what was the most audacious part of that process of writing the book for you at the time?
Oh God, so many bits. Do you know what? I think one of the most audacious things about, for me anyway, writing a book is putting yourself on the page and believing. Like my editor was always saying to me, own it, Sarah, own it. You know, I would dilute it sometimes. I don't know what your editor said to you, but Penguin was so clear with me all the time about saying stronger on that point. Own it, you know, say that's what you believe. Like it was literally say, I believe this. And I don't know whether that's, I don't know what that is, whether that's part of my upbringing or, I mean, I even find it really hard now in terms of all of the sort of social media and stuff. It's like, how do you stand behind yourself with what you believe and accept that it won't be everybody's cup of tea, and some people will not agree with you, and some people will think, you know, this about it. But how do you hold strong and know that internally you are, I mean, you know, for me, there's something about that line in me, in my body, that matters a lot to me, that it's going all the way down. I often go like this to myself. It's like, where's the line of belief in what you do? And I think it's hard. That's what I found really hard, is putting something. I never really intended to write a book. I was asked to write the book. And then, of course, when someone asks me to do something, I tend to think, oh, well, I've got to do it then. Which I am better now at saying, do I have to do it, as opposed to jumping into, yeah, I'm going to respond because someone's asked me to do something. And that, you know, that's part of me really managing my own energy. But the book was a moment of like reveal.
And you know what I loved about it? It's interesting. You said it's, you know, and it's our mental Rich. He said something that really stuck with me, that, you know, you will know that your book is a success when someone hated it. And they had that really strong opinion about it, because it is, you cannot please everybody, to your point. You cannot be someone, you know, a cup of tea for everybody. And I remember someone said, and again, there was another nice analogy, is like, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I'm a cappuccino, and I'm actually a very strong cappuccino. So I don't even want to be a cup of tea. Yeah. And it's that distinction between owning what we truly believe in, and also knowing that not everybody will certainly not everybody will agree, but and that's okay too. And you know, it's an interesting concept, as you said, but yeah, owning it, I love it. It's just owning what it is, and that's, you know, audacious about it. It is very hard.
It's hard, and especially if, you know, I have a desire in the next sort of 5 years to be much braver with what I believe. And I, you know, now at my age, I'm still feeling that feels slightly, scary. And I think it's because of external opinion, right? You know, and I witness other people saying things, and I think, yeah, why have I not, you know, that's what I've believed all my life, but I just haven't put it out there. And a book is one way of actually putting it out there. But now I want it to be even bolder, Alina, with what, you know, and it may not go down very well. And I'm thinking, do it anyway.
Go down very well with whom, though, Sarah? That's the thing. So, and we just had a lovely statement from Gary, and he said, being intentional without being too aggressive is an art. Absolutely, like everything else in life, it's science and art, you know, and it's that dance between the two.
It's definitely a dance.
It's a total dance. But I'm so curious, because you said you want to be bolder, and that's music to my ears. And like a violinist that, you know, is I'd love to ask you, so what would be an audacious thing for you in the sort of 5 years time? And I know a lot of your passion is legacy, and we're sort of at that stage, and that's really important.
that's exactly. So I'm going to speak out now exactly what it is. So this year, I did my first legacy retreat, Legacy Moves retreat. It's called Legacy Moves because I was so intrigued with why so many leaders were saying to me, I don't know if I've got another corporate job in me. But I have got potentially another 10, 20, 30 years where I want to make an impact in the world, but it's not necessarily in this way. And there are other younger leaders who wanted to carry on, but they wanted to do their leadership slightly differently. They wanted to find their legacy in their leadership and the way they do it. And this was coming to me in so many different ways. I just thought, right, okay, Sarah, this is what you need to do. So the most audacious thing I did, Alina, was I booked a venue because I knew where I wanted to take them away. I mean, there's stuff that goes on before it, but there's this intensive 4-day deep dive I wanted to do with, leaders that wanted to make a difference, but also were willing to step away and really challenge themselves on what that meant. I found the venue. I booked the venue. I paid for the venue. I didn't have one person come in. But I so believed in it. And I did. I got 8 fantastic leaders. But my bold mission is that I want to do this more. And I want to set up a foundation. I have set up a foundation called the Vita Foundation in my mother's name. Vita, I love the word vitality. Vita, it's always the heart of energy and vitality. And I want a percentage of what happens from that program, that Legacy Moves program, to go into that retreat so that I can offer the exact same experience for younger people, particularly in their 20s, because, my children are in their 20s. And I hear it through their friends and through their conversations, like they've got a mission, but they can't make money out of it, or they don't believe they can make money out of it, or they have, it's like, come on, let's put some real boldness into our younger people who are going to lead things differently in their way. And I want to offer it to them who maybe cannot afford, the elite retreat that we offer. That's what I want to do. And I want to do more of that. And I see myself doing it all over the world. Like, wow, I mean, that's what I want to do. Yeah.
And so it is, as we say in our community. And so it is. I love it because you've just sort of brought into my consciousness. I just sort of remember, I've done the Audacious Leaders Retreats in Transylvania 4 years in a row. And first year, which was in the middle of the pandemic, I bought 10 plane tickets. Just like that. So that investment is like whoever, and we had nobody. I mean, but in the end, we filled it. And now next year is going to be the 5th. You need to be bold and you totally need to believe in it, as you said.
You believe yourself so strongly. And that's where the rod comes in for me. It's like, right, I'm standing straight in this belief. And when you stand straight in the belief, I think you make things happen.
Totally, because it's the energy. I mean, when you believe it, I always say when we believe it in that, in whatever it is, in our mission and our people, in everybody else around us will have no choice but believe it because they see the energy emanating from a believer, effectively.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I know we've all sort of got a couple of minutes, and I know you're really passionate. Actually, I would love, because you went down, and we also in our programs and retreats, we always have a sponsor place for the same reason. For me, charity has been hugely close to my heart for the last 20 years, actually. It's been a consistent and constant thing that I've done it through my time, through my money, through a lot of the things. But tell the audience, because I experienced that phenomenal play on Saturday night, and that's probably what we should be doing more as a community, actually.
So this is a charity that my business supports. It hits all sorts of buttons for us. I mean, it's a performing arts charity, and it works with specific schools in a particularly underprivileged area in London. And it's called Seen and Heard. And it's literally allowing young people to be seen and to be heard. And it's supported by volunteers from the professional actors, professional costume props, people who give their time and their energy with great love to these young people who have to write small plays. And there's one rule: they cannot have human beings in the play, so they can use objects, metaphors, and they work with a dramaturg, a director and a writer to help them, but they're not allowed to change the actors or the director is not allowed to change the words of the children at all. And we have these magical, they produce, Roz, who heads it up, is an extraordinary woman who, this idea originated in New York, I believe, quite a few years ago. And the idea was picked up and taken by 2 people before Roz, but Roz has taken it on. And they run this incredible charity where they serve these local schools, primary schools, and they give these young people an opportunity to be seen and to be heard through professionals. And it's magical and it's wonderful. And yeah, you came and saw it on Saturday. And yeah, it hit so many buttons. And now I hope, the arts have slowly, get off my soapbox for a minute, but the arts have slowly been diminished in the curriculum in schools. And what this is doing is giving these young people confidence, acknowledgement, and imagination, giving them absolute acknowledgement for their own dreaming and their own their own statements. Because actually, through these metaphors and these plays, there's some really strong themes around what's great for the world, as you witnessed.
Oh no, I mean, it was absolutely exceptional. I mean, it's a big endorsement and testimony of that talent. It was extraordinary, the quality of that play, and as you said, to know that there were, and those kids of 9 or 10 years old to be so acknowledged was just beautiful to witness. Mm-hmm. So absolutely, I mean, and I'm aware of the time. I could probably speak to you for another how many hours, talking about things that we're really passionate about. But is there anything that you want to sort of, leave the audience in an audacious way? I know where do people find you? Sara?
I'm on LinkedIn. We're Coaching Impact. I'm on Instagram. And if anyone wants to achieve more, learn faster, live well, that's where to go. That's what I'm passionate about, is helping leaders lead for impact, for good for them, good for their teams, and good for the world.
And you've also got a podcast, which you've forgotten, the Better Depression.
About that. Yes, I've also got Better on Depression podcast. Yes.
There you go.
You know why? It's because we've just done 50 episodes and also having a pause moment until September. And it's like, okay, for this moment, I'm not living and breathing Better Under Pressure. But they are fabulous conversations. I love it. It's a bit like this probably is for you, where you have really, so the typical piece of feedback I get is, I never thought we could talk for 1 hour or 45 minutes around how pressure turns up for them. But they're wonderful conversations. And I just speak to leaders in their fields, be it the arts, sport, military, leaders in businesses and organizations. I want to have some younger people in as well to talk about how pressure shows up for them. The NHS, let's talk about pressure and how do we turn pressure into something that actually enlivens us and galvanizes us and allows us to grow and be better under pressure, which is why it's called Better Under Pressure, because it's meant to be slightly provocative, but it's not about let's bring more pressure on. It's about how do I own that pressure and turn it into something that makes me feel even better, bigger, and purposeful.
Oh, I love that. And as I could so feel, even through the virtual world, your passion and your energy, as I said. But thank you, Sara.
Very much.
You have to do this again, because I think we should run. We'll have to do another half an hour. I don't know. We'll find some time end of the year next year, I think.
Perfect.
But thank you.
Enjoy your break.
Thank you.
Enjoy your launch. I look forward to it immensely.
Yeah, no, definitely. I will look forward to having you there. And yeah, we'll more about that to come in August.